So nice to see everybody here today. My name's Michelle DiBiase, and I'm a clinical assistant professor here at Sargent. And on behalf of Sargent College and the Department of Health Sciences and the nutrition program, I'd like to welcome you here today to our what I think is going to be an enlightening and thought-provoking discussion and lecture. So I just want to tell you what sort of brought me to this place with Dr. Murphy here today. I had been having some meetings with Dr. Bell, the psychology department, and we were talking about a hypothesis that I was tossing around in my head. I'm a registered dietitian, and my profession is made up of 98% by the most recent estimate women, 2% men. And I had been trying to come up with some sort of a reason to explain why dietitians, although they may have similar educational background and similar experience, tend to make less than some of their similarly educated and experienced counterparts, pharmacists, physical therapists, those types of things. And that's when Dr. Bell brought Dr. Murphy's name to my attention, and that's sort of where we find ourselves here today with this lecture. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Deborah Bell of the Department of Psychology and ask her to come up and introduce Dr. Murphy for us.
Thank you, Dr. DiBiase, and thank you for giving me the honor of introducing Evelyn Murphy, and thank you for inviting Evelyn Murphy here today. I can hardly think of a more powerful intervention into the lives of young women and those of us who work with young women than to have Evelyn Murphy speak to us. Evelyn Murphy has been a power hitter in the state of Massachusetts and nationally for many decades. From 1975 until 1978, she served as Massachusetts Secretary of Environmental Affairs, with responsibility for setting the state's environmental policy. And later, in 1983 to 1986, she served as Secretary of Economic Affairs for the state, with responsibility for the state's economic policies, including her initiative to allocate public funds for biotechnology, marine science, and photovoltaic ventures. In 1986, Evelyn Murphy made history by being elected Lieutenant Governor of the state of Massachusetts, an event I remember extremely well. I don't know if I was quite aware at the time that not only was she our first elected Lieutenant Governor, but she was the first woman in the state's 210-year history to hold any of what are called constitutional offices. Prior to her, no woman had been elected governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, treasurer, auditor, or U.S. senator from the state of Massachusetts. And looking at that list, I think there are one or two that have not yet been filled. She campaigned herself for governor in 1990, did not win election, but moved on to many other responsibilities. And I'm going to skip some of these things because it would make for a very long introduction. I would like to say that she has been the recipient of 11 honorary degrees and over 100 national, state, and community awards. I should also mention her education. She has her undergraduate degree from Duke University in mathematics, her MA in economics from Columbia University, and a PhD in economics from Duke University. And what brings her here today is a crusade that she has begun and which she continues to make all of us aware of the remaining significant disparity in salaries paid to men and women in this state and across the country. She has created a grassroots organization called the Wage Project. She has written an excellent book called Getting Even, and why women don't get paid like men and what to do about it. I'm going to pass this book around so everybody here today can take a look at it, and without further ado, introduce Evelyn Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today to hear me and to engage in this. Thank you particularly Professor DiBiase and Dr. Bell for this kind of support and this interest, they do you a genuine service. Because I think if I am good and do my job today, I may start something for you that carries through the rest of your professional career as you go through your working life. Here's what I want to do. I want to talk to you about what the gender wage gap is. And then I want to talk to you about how you deal with it. What I've discovered as I go around the country doing this, and I do workshops. I do workshops that are about 2 to 2.5 hours long. I'm going to try and compress a lot of that into a kind of skimming across the top of it today, just to get you hooked on the issues and a commitment to act on your own behalf, for your own good. So that's what I'm going to try and do. What I've discovered out of these workshops is I'm going to ask you today to work with me. This is engaging. If you have a question sometime in this, as much as it's going to drive the technicians nuts, ask it. I want you to work with me. And probably if you have a question, somebody else has got the same question. So feel that you are helping me, because you'll have a better sense from where your careers are headed and what you're thinking about right now. You have a better sense of what matters to you than I have. So engage with me. Let me warn you that what I'm about to talk about when we start talking about how you figure out what you're worth and how to get there is going to sound very simple. And it is simple, but it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do these things. So when you start saying, this is all simple, I get it, it's not going to be hard. Don't for a minute. Don't kid yourself about how hard this is to actually do on your own behalf. And the reason is that we women have, we have a thing about talking about money and how much we earn. It's hard to do. Lots of reasons why. I mean, we are all socialized to be uncomfortable with it. I know from my own personal experience, I never knew all the time I was growing up until my father died when he was age 90. I never knew how much he ever made while I was going to school or even afterwards. Had not a clue. We didn't discuss it in the family because that was rude to do. There are lots of other families in which those discussions don't go on because it's just not nice, or it's not proper, or it's not your business, or whatever reasons. So some part of us culturally, socially, are socialized not to talk about money or to discuss what we earn. Some of it is cultural, based on our cultures, whether it's a white culture, black culture, Asian culture, Hispanic culture, whatever. Within our own cultures, we also have some difficulties dealing with money that are quite special to these cultures. We also have in our society a kind of real pushback here, institutionally. What we make and being paid fairly is about power. Money is a proxy for power. And a lot of this is, although it's male-female because men have been making all the money all along, and while we don't want to get in a fight with them, we also want to be paid and treated fairly because it matters not only to us, but to our families, to our kids, to everybody that depends upon us financially. So there's a lot of pushback here, too. All of that is a piece of why what I say may be simple, but it's not easy to do it. Understand that. Half of what I say to you today is about what's in your head, and half of it is about techniques. If you can combine both, I can promise you that you will make a lot more money through your life. You will financially be better off, more secure, more stable, if you can both get across all these inhibitions and barriers to being paid fairly, and also know the mechanics and the details. I have a very good friend, I've had a lifetime friend, who is a sculptor, a sculptress. She is the woman who did the ducklings in the public garden. Make way for ducklings, you know? Her name is Nancy Shuren. I've watched this woman over 40 years as a sculptor, and what I know is when she initially did figures, people, how much she studied the human body. And I mean, just like a physician, she knew all the muscles, all the joints, in order to recreate in simple form what that human body was like in some of her work. And she did the same thing with ducklings. She does it with all the animals that she does. Her research and her understanding of all those details allows her to step back and give you these gorgeous and meaningful forms like the ducklings. That's what this is all about. It's about grasping and understanding and mastering all the details so that when you step back, you're in control of this bigger picture of what your life and your earnings are all about. Okay, that's an introduction. Here's what I want to talk to you first about. first I want to say, for any of this to matter, you have to understand what the wage gap means to you. Now, we've heard about the gender wage gap. The gender wage gap is that women today earn 77 cents, 78 cents, let's say 77 cents on the dollar for every dollar that men earn. There's a gap of 23 cents. Now, when I started working the gap, the women earned 59 cents, so the gap was even bigger. It was huge. Now, but we've heard it so much, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean a thing to any of us when you keep talking about the gender wage gap, until you personalize it. And once you personalize it, I promise you, you're never going to forget it. So here's what it means to you personally. If you, your sister, somebody in your family just graduated from high school this last spring, that woman will earn $700,000 less over her working career than the young man standing right next to her, getting his degree, getting his high school diploma along with her. $700,000. When you graduated from college, as a college graduate, you will earn $1,200,000 less than the young man standing right next to you getting his degree. And if you got an MBA or a medical degree or law degree, you will make $2 million less. You will lose $2 million compared to the guy next to you getting the same degree. $700,000 million to $2 million is a lot of money. So think about where you are with your undergraduate degree or getting your graduate degree. Somewhere in there, you're going to miss at least $1 million unless you do something about it. So that's what I want to impress upon you. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you first to understand how this happens. It happens not in a big way. Say you graduated from college and you went out and you got a $50,000 job. You're a dietitian. You got a $50,000 job. And you think, wow, that's neat. I'm off on a good start. This is a good salary. And the guy next to you who also got his degree along with you gets $55,000. You think, well, I'm earning so much money that I'm just going to blow by this. You know, I'll show them by all the work I do that you know, I'm worth more. And maybe he's got something I don't have. And you know, I need to pay off my loans. I'm just going to keep going. So the end of the year comes. The end of the year comes, and the boss looks at both of you, and he says, you know, both the great work, exceptionally fine work, you got a bonus. Well, his bonus on $55,000 is a lot bigger than yours. It's a 5% bonus for all salaries, so his bonus is bigger. And at the end of that year, he also he looks at both of you and says, well, I got to decide what you're going to earn next year. And he looks at you and he says, well, you know, you're really hard. You're solid. You're good. You do good work. You're very diligent. And you're responsible. And so I'm going to give you a 5% raise. I'll put you up to $52,500. And he's hard charging. He's just a go-getter. He's out there doing all these things. So I'm going to bump him up to $60,000. Well, guess what? Now this year, $52,500 to $60,000, it's now a $7,500 difference. It was $5,000, $7,500. The end of the year comes, and you both, and the reviews go on, and you both get great reviews again. You're just excellent reviews. So you get a bonus, and again, your bonus is much smaller now than his, even smaller. And then the boss looks at both of you and he says, well, you know, I gotta decide what you're gonna earn for this next year. And he says to you, well, you know, you're very solid, you're steady, we like what you're doing. And oh, by the way, you said you're pregnant, you're considering, you and her husband are considering having a baby, so I want to make sure you come back, but I'm going to bump you up to $55,000, just so you will understand we appreciate you and all your good work. And he's going to be somewhere, he's going to be in the leadership in this organization sometime or another, so we'll put him up to $70,000. 55, 70, it's now $15,000. It was $5,000, it went to $7,500, now it's $15,000. You have lost over these 3 years almost $30,000 compared to him. Both getting the same really exceptional evaluations, both doing essentially the same work with the same qualifications, the same experience. That's how this happens. The longer you work, by the way, if you follow this, the wider that gap gets. That's how, and it adds up to the $1.2 million. It just keeps crawling up, unless you do something about it. Now, why it happens? Well, it happens for a bunch of reasons. If you listen to what I was saying, you'll hear in that some of the biases and stereotypes. I mean, you're solid, you're good, you're methodical, you're doing all this good work, and he's a hard charger. Read more money. And, oh, well, you may be pregnant and we're going to have a kid, so read pregnancy discrimination. Read discrimination and all this stuff. It's about biases and stereotypes that still exist where we work. You think they're gone, but they're not gone. I hear them all the time. So they're still there. But you're not going to sue on them because, everybody knows that if you end up litigating, you lose your job, you lose your career, you may lose your husband, you may lose your mental health. It's tough. It's very nasty stuff. So you want to just keep on going. But it's hurting you, and it's adding up. But it happens because of all these little places where that kind of discrimination exists. And it also happens because, in addition to that, we talk ourselves out of doing something about it. We say, well, if I just do a good job, they'll recognize it and I'll get paid. That's like saying, well, I don't have to do anything about it. I'm going to be given this stuff. No, you're not. Or I can get by on less. Well, guess what? The food costs the same. The MBTA costs the same. Rent is the same for him or for you. So all the costs of living are the same for him and for you. You're just accepting a second-class life, which you shouldn't do. So it happens because we don't act. What I want to do in the remaining part of this hour is to talk about how you can act in some very shrewd ways to get paid what you are worth. But I want you first and foremost to always remember personalize this gender wage gap, because that's going to drive you to do this, to act on your own behalf. So, as dopey as this may sound, the next time you hear, or read that the gender wage gap is 23 cents, I want you to stop whatever you're doing. I want you to clear your brain for 5 seconds, and I want you to say out loud, wherever you are. You can be in the office, you can be on the street, you can be in a restaurant. I don't care where you are. Whenever you hear that gender wage gap is 23 cents, I want you to say out loud, I want my $1 million. Because then you're going to remind yourself that you have to do something about this. Okay? So we're going to practice for a minute. If I say the gender wage gap is 23 cents, you say? I want my $1 million. We are taping this. I want you to yell back at that crowd that's going to see us and get some steam in their souls, too. If I say the gender wage gap is 23 cents? I want my $1 million. Better, good. That's it. Remember, keep that concept in your brain and foremost in your brain. Okay, now here's what we're going to do about it. There are two things involved in how you get paid what you're worth. Nothing more than you're worth, but what you're worth. And that is, first you need to benchmark, as I call it, your salary. And then once you've benchmarked it so that you're objective about what you're worth, this isn't what I think, this isn't what my friend gets, this is not what I heard this job is worth. It is what you are worth for the job you are going to go get. So you need to benchmark that. And once you've benchmarked it, then we can talk about salary negotiation. But we're not going to talk about negotiating a salary until we've figured out what you're worth. Okay, so the first step here, and I've got just a couple slides to bore you with. And here we are. So the first thing I want you to do is go to my web page, wageproject.org. And once you get on that, you will see this new page. Down on the bottom left-hand corner, this is still new, so it's got a typo. Calculate what your job is worth. It should be your. It will be changed by tomorrow, I hope. But you go down to that and punch that, calculate what your job is worth. And we're going to pretend for the next few minutes that I am a dietitian. I'm about to graduate from BU. I will be registered. I will have my degree. And I'm now about to start looking for my first professional job. So what you do, once you've hit that, you will come on to a co-branded website with salary.com. There are lots of other salary calculators on the web, so I'm not shilling for salary.com. I use this one because it's useful, because there's some important data here. But if you go down where it says select a job category, say browse all titles, you click that and you go down and then you'll see this long tab of all kinds of industries, from finance to accounting to you name it, are all there. And what I did was pull out healthcare practitioners, because that's where dietitians are. And then you want to make sure that you are benchmarking the salary of what you're worth in the zip code or the metropolitan area where you're going to work. Not where you live, but where you work. Not national data, where you work. Okay, so once you've done that, you come up with a whole bunch of job categories. And the first thing you need to do is to figure out what your job title is. And for me, so when I look down this, I see dietitian, diet technician, dietitian home care. There's another one down there, dietitian senior. What you're looking for is to match your interests, or what your job is and what you're pursuing right now, about 75%. You'll never get it all. But in order to do that, you go down, let's see if I can get this. Go down to where it says dietitian more, because you want to get more information about what this job category is. And when I do, up comes this job description. Now when I look at that job description and I read it, this is what I want to match 75%. So I coordinate, plan, conduct programs to educate patients about nutrition and administering medical nutritional therapy, oversee activities and provide advice for food services. What you need to do is take each one of those sentences and see whether that's exactly the kind of job that you're pursuing, the kind of responsibilities that you're going to accept, and whether you fit this. For example, requires a bachelor's degree and is a registered dietitian with 0 to 2 years of experience. Well, that's me. I'm graduating this next spring. I will be registered, and I will have 0 to 2 years of experience. But by the way, when you take this job title and then put down beside it whether you match all these things, so I'm going to put down check marks by 0 to 2 years, check mark. I also should tell you that I have, for the last 4 summers, when I was between years in college, I was working as an aide in an assisted living residence over in Brookline, and I worked there in the basically in the kitchen with some of the dietitians, which is why I got interested in dietitians as a profession, and so I sort of have about 12 months worth of somewhat related experience. I was working there, I got paid there as part of how I got through college. I also did a lot of volunteer work for some hospitals every once in a while, so I understand what it's like to deal with patients or customers and the kind of presence that you need. You put down all those things that you've done, particularly the paying part, but also some of the volunteer stuff, so that you're beginning to match up where you should be, where you'll be in the salary range in a minute. But clearly for me, if I punched the more on senior dietitian, it would say 3 years, minimum of 3 years experience. I don't have that, can't get there. So this is, for me, the right job title. Once you've got the right job title, then when you go back here, if you see this base pay free, that's what you want to push. Now let me warn you what base pay free means. What you get for free is free. And at salary.com, they update these salaries every week, so that you could say, oh, these numbers are off because of the recession. Wrong. These are the numbers that have been reported last week in the recession. So they're current data. But for free, what you get is the national reporting. Every employer, these are employers' numbers, data. Every employer reports in for that job title, dietitians, what they paid a dietitian. And then for free, what you get is an adjustment for this metropolitan area or the zip code. It's an algorithm which adjusts for the cost of living and the wage rates in that area. It's not perfect, but it's a good proxy for now. Once you get into your salary negotiation and you got a lot of money at stake, you may want to buy the product, this one or some other websites, which then goes in and says, for your particular zip code area, these are the reported salaries, so that you know for size of company, type of place, whether, you know, it may be that you want to work in a hospital versus a nursing home versus a school, whatever, but it will help you sort out and get far more fine-grained in what the actual reported salaries, the market rate is. Okay, so, but for now, let's take the proxy. So you click base pay on dietitian, and what comes up is this bell curve. Now, the key here is, and the reason down at the bottom, if you look way down at the bottom, you will see that if you were to benchmark your salary on national data, you would hurt yourself by about $7,000. And the reason is that, as we all know, it's expensive to live here. And so part of we pay better because it costs you more to live here. So be careful on benchmarking, that you don't hurt yourself by underestimating because you take the easy way out with some national data or a national survey. It will hurt you one way or another. You may grossly underestimate or grossly overestimate. So here's the next step. I've determined my job title, and now I've got to figure out what my salary target is, what my value is in this range. So I want to ask you. You now know that and this is for dietitians with 0 to 2 years of experience, with a bachelor's degree, registered dietitians, and where should I be in this range? If you were me and you said, here's what you're worth, Evelyn, what would you say to this? Yes, brave one.
Well, you have at least a year of experience from your summer job, so
Yep.
it should be above the median, I would say.
Good, good, yes.
I'd say you're a graduate of Sargent College. You should be way above.
Yes, way above. So how far above? No, now. 75th percentile. Okay, so I should be starting out at 64,000, or at least, or over that. Yes?
You should ask for at least 65.
Ask for at least 65. Why do you say that?
Because if it's too high, they'll negotiate down.
They will. That's right.
And it also tells them that you think you're worth it.
Yep. Anybody else got a view on this one? You comfortable with me asking for a 65? Okay, that's my target. That's what I'm going to be looking for. Now, once you've done this, and by the way, here's the one thing I would caution around the 65 is contrasted with 64 or somewhere between 58 and 64. What you want to make sure when you establish your target is that you can do exactly what you were suggesting. I do have a year's, I can justify, I can explain why I feel I'm in this place on the bell curve. I've got at least a year's experience, and this is for people with 0 to 2, so I'm at least at the median, probably higher. I do have this great degree, a lot of experience, a lot of internship work as well, so I am going up there. I do want to aim high, but I want to be realistic, and I want to be able to justify. I want to be so clear about that that's what I believe. No games. No games and no overinflation just to play with this. But that I can, in my own mind and in my own brain, justify my value there. That's the power of this. So, okay, so I'm going to be up there at 64. Now, once you've done that, the next thing you need to do is also look at your benefits, because your salary is just a part of the whole thing. But you also get benefits. It's a whole compensation package. Don't forget those benefits, because they too can be negotiated and they too are an important part. And when you look at your benefits, these are the benefits. Hold on for a minute. See, if you look down here at, right up there, it says benefits. Oh, and what I don't have time to go through right now, but if you want to see it, you may think that my $64,000 salary or target is a huge amount of money. I think so, because I'm just starting out. But once you see what your paycheck is, when you plug in Massachusetts and see what your take-home pay is after they've taken out all those things for taxes and for Social Security and Medicare and all that other stuff, you're gonna be shocked at what you're gonna take home every month. Now, when I do this, when I do the workshop, I have already do a budget just to say, okay, so what are you gonna pay for rent and for food and for clothes and for travel and for everything else, and just bare bones budget, and then we go to the paycheck, and that there's a gulp here because. Because suddenly you realize, and you should do this just to make sure you understand at the bottom level what the minimum salary is that you need to get by on, given some expectations about how you want to live after you leave school. So go through that and then click paycheck sometime and see whether you're, so you will know where you have to hold the line no matter what, because you got to pay off your loans and everything else. Okay, but back to this. So here are the benefits. What you need to do with benefits is take a look, and what I discovered is even if I were just looking for the median, the 57,000, I would have a value of another $12,000, $13,000 of benefits here. $23,000 more than just the $58,000 salary. It's a lot of money. And what you want to do is make sure that when you start to talk to an employer, you go down this, and these little purple colors here, if you click them, they'll explain what's included in this, so you'll understand what's included in health care and in benefits and pensions and time off and so forth. So here too, there's a lot of information behind this to help you explain. You need to list the benefits of the job that you're going for and this sort of market basket of value of benefits, and see whether in fact the benefits that you're being offered come anywhere near the $23,000 that you could get somewhere. These are market salaries and market benefits. So all you're doing here, by the way, is that employer on the other side of the table, these are the data that he or she are looking at. All you're doing is leveling the playing field by knowing the same kind of data. This is the market value. If you don't get the job here, you go across the street and you get it there, and that's the value that's going to be paid. So this is not about, this is just about fairness. It's about being paid fairly. And you want to make sure that that your total compensation package is fair. That you're not leaving another $23,000 on the table. And there are lots of ways of negotiating on benefits as well. Okay, so that is how you objectify your benefits. Questions, thoughts, responses? Sound easy? Okay, now, having done that, now we're going to talk about salary negotiation. So, enough of this. The first thing you need to know about in salary negotiation is that a salary negotiation is a discussion. Get that mindset. This is not a fight. It's not an ultimatum. It's not a win-lose. It's not a contest. This is a discussion. And once you get that in your head, it becomes a lot easier to do this. So, and once you have that kind of tone, then you also, and you can control the tone. If this person on the other side of the table who's negotiating starts to get edgy, take it back to being a discussion. That's all this is, until you come to some sense of whether you're going to accept this or not. That's part one. The tone also should be positive. Yeah, this sounds simple, but you'd be amazed. If you don't set a positive tone, first of all, nobody wants to hire a sourpuss. So you don't want to, but you don't want to be flaky soft, you know? It's just, this is about just being positive. And matter of fact, because you've done all this homework. You also want to be flexible in how you deal with this. You have just done, when you benchmarked your worth for that job that you're going after, you've done the hard work. You've really done it. And so now, being flexible is to see what's in the best interest of that person, of the company, of the organization that you're seeking to work with. Understanding that. Being flexible in how you, there are lots of ways you can get to the end point. You know where you want to, I know I want to get to the $67,000, 64, oh, keep going up here, $65,000. I know that's where I want to get, but I can be flexible how I get there. So this conversation, but the only way you can be really flexible is if you listen very carefully. The art form of salary negotiation is to listen so carefully that you hear and understand what's in the interest of that person on the other side of the table. Because once you do that, you can figure out how to cast your qualifications your experience, your interest, your drive, your character, your traits in a way that works and that they know and they understand you've done your homework. You really want this, and you understand them so well that you can do this. So flexibility, positive tone are all very important in how you set the stage. Now, there are some tactics. The first tactic is you never want to be the first person to put money on the table. Now, let's talk about this. There is often a pressure from the person who's interviewing you to say, okay, so how much money do you want to earn? What do you expect? And guess what? You never want to do that until you have a job offer. So, because there's nothing to negotiate in terms of a salary until you have a job. So in a way, it's a trap. And it's a trap that often works, because if you say, oh, I want $80,000, this person says, oh my God, this woman has no idea what reality is here. Or you say, I want $20,000, they'll take you in a heartbeat because you so undersold yourself. You can't help yourself at all by putting a statement about money, or even a range, if you can avoid it, on the table first. So what you need to do is think about language that helps you avoid answering that question respectfully. So here's some thoughts. And the politician in me says, script this stuff out, folks, beforehand. Because you may think I'm doing this in a kind of breezy way, but I have a 40-page script behind this. Everything I tell you and say to you right now is scripted. So I may dance around it a little bit and go from page to page, but the plain fact is there are certain things I want to talk to you about and convey to you because they're important, and this is one of them. So here's the thing. If the question comes, well, and you're still talking about the job, you haven't quite decided whether you're going to accept the job yet. So what do you think? Do you want this amount of, what do you want to earn? There's some things you can say like, well, you know better than I what this job is worth. Boom, back in his court. Or if you really get pressed, my research has said that the salary range is sort of like this. You haven't said that's what you expect or want or anything else, but you're just saying, here's my research. All you're doing is telling this person that you have done the research too. You know what the market is paying for my dietitian's job. The really best line I can suggest is, I will accept any reasonable offer. Because what you're really saying is, you've done your homework, you know what reasonable is, and you'll accept it. So you're showing you want to work this out, but you're not a fool. So it's all those things that keep sort of batting this back. And then it's we don't have a job offer yet. Let us figure out, first of all, whether you're going to offer me a job and whether I'm going to accept based on this job, and then we can get into discussing the salary. But let's talk about this job. And I want to hear more about it. I want to understand it better. All those ways, tactics, can help you make sure that you never put a number on the table before you've got a job, or even afterwards, after you've got the job offer. Now, there are a couple more points I want to cover here, lest I forget them all. And I guess the ones that we've hit one already, but the academic in me says, aim high but be realistic is also one of the tactics that's very helpful, because all studies show that if you don't aim high, you're not going to get it. And also that it is in that aiming high that you manage to get a salary that's higher. If you settle out beforehand, you're going to get a lot less if you sort of dampen down. But do be realistic. Do prepare yourself to make sure that you can fully support and justify your belief that this is what you're worth. The wonder of the internet right now is that you can really go to school on this employer. Look up the employer. Just do some research on what that employer is priorities are, what their products are, what they value, get their language, because every employer has a different approach to what matters to them. And if you've got that and you can anticipate that in your discussion, you can create a better justification for your own worth in their terms. Finally, so you need to anticipate that. You also need to anticipate you need to anticipate what objections are going to be. And here's the thing about objections. You know, I'm cranked up to get this $65,000. And I know that one of the objections, if I'm really honest, oh, by the way, if you're really honest with yourself, you can probably anticipate 95% of the objections. The test is whether you're going to be truly honest with yourself. So first objection is going to be, well, you know, you're really overpricing yourself because you really don't have, you know, you sort of have a year's experience, but it's not really experience in the same way. And I can say, well, look, that was a year's worth of paid work. It was very related to what I'm now going to be doing. I got a sense of the institution, the organization, so I regard it as a year's worth of experience. Don't you? And so that one I'm going to come back at it because I really do believe that those 4 summers of long, hard, sweaty work were truly notches in my belt. There may be something else in which somebody says, well, you know, but you don't have 2 years of experience. And you have to say, no, I don't. There's no way to fudge on that one. So, but if you've anticipated and you say, no, I don't, that's okay, you've handled it, and you move on. So anticipate which objections you can handle and how you want to, which ones you have to say, can't handle that one, but don't let it throw you off. The final point I'd say to you is never, never, never let any of this get personal. And never make your worth anything that's personal. You know, hard truth, but pathetically true. Employers don't care if you have an illness, or if there's a family illness, or if you've got huge student loans you have to pay back, or something like that. Any personal needs, they don't really care. They've got a job they want done. They're willing to pay for that job and for you to do that job. So be careful on this. As driving as some of your personal needs may be, don't bring them in, because they won't go anywhere, and they'll hurt you. They'll hurt you because an employer will look at you and say, this is a high-maintenance potential employee. If she's doing this now, God knows what she's going to bring up once she gets to work. You don't want anything personal in this if you can possibly get away from it. Okay. So that's sort of about the tips and the tactics and a tone. And now we are, God, no questions, okay. You still with me?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In the case of, for that,
Aha.
in the case of that job description,
let's say you had a master's degree. So how does that relate into work experience if you haven't more educational experience that could have, you know, had more internships or just more practicums with
That's a great point. That's a great
hands-on
point.
experience?
I'd raise it because for this particular job, it was just a bachelor's. You are more qualified. You've had more education, more experience in education. So that puts you again at the upper end of that range. Until you get to some of the job descriptions that will say a master's or a PhD required. But for that particular job, going in with a master's, remind them that that's part of what you bring to this, and that makes you even more valuable. Always remind when you can add even more to the table. Yes.
A lot of the positions that I'm looking at are advertising for a master's or a PhD. So how would you place yourself in that range if you had a PhD versus a master's? If people if you get one, baseline starting salary, I've heard that there are numbers where you can go based on the number of semesters of school. There's some statistical, you get paid 1% more depending on each semester of school that you've had. And I've just wondered if there are more sources of information that you would recommend for calculating a more precise salary if you had different factors?
Yeah, I don't. But here's what I would suggest. Look, one of the reasons I like conversations is I just did a 3-hour workshop along these lines with surgeons in Chicago a week ago Sunday, and women surgeons. And what you discover out of women surgeons is that there's a whole array. The professional data is very important. So while salary.com can give you some job descriptions, if you have more resources here that you can go to that will give you a finer grain, I leave that to Professor DiBiase to help you with, as well as others here. But you need to go back into these professional organizations, see what kind of data they're gathering, and then see whether they cut this any finer between master's and PhD. But when you do that, beware. Always remember the 2 other principles here, which is make sure you're really comparing the right job title with all of its responsibilities, its requirement for experience, accountability, all that job title, and the area that you're living in. Because as you saw from doing this on US data, you can hurt yourself enormously. So I'd suggest the only way to do that is to go back into professional organizations and see if they've got better data. The librarians do, I know. Yes?
So I guess once a number has been thrown out on the table, how do you sort of throw back another number? I mean, how does that negotiation end up working?
We're going to get to that because we're going to get to a salary offer.
Jumping the gun.
Yeah, no, you're not. That's what everybody wants to get to. Okay, so hold it for 1 minute. Is there anybody else who wants to? Yes?
Should you be doing all these negotiations verbally and asking, because people tend to use a lot of email these days and often an offer
Yeah.
via.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, the more of this you can do verbally, eyeball to eyeball, the better. So much gets lost in emails, so much gets lost in telephone calls, that and it's worth the time. So if there's anything in which you say, look, I really want to come in and talk to you. You want me for this job, we're having a serious job discussion, I want to see you, you ought to see me. The body language, the intensity of that eye contact is very important. So it serves you well to keep always insisting on doing any salary negotiation in person. And by the way, when you're in this, one final point, and then I'll get into what happens when you pitch a number. You have to keep selling yourself. Don't assume for a minute that what you discussed in the job interview, even a couple days ago, you're back there now because you're now about to get this offer and you're about to start a salary negotiation, that all that stuff got remembered. Because that person on the other side is interviewing tons of people or has lots of other things that he or she's doing during the day. So it never hurts to, at times, be repetitive, reminding somebody, but you have to tie it into, let me remind you why I'm worth that, because I have this master's degree, in addition to my bachelor's. It's all these things. Don't ever assume, you're the only one who can sell yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you. And so you need to be able to feel comfortable. At times, while you may think it's obvious, it may not be obvious that that person remembers from the last meeting the key point and how you regard your value and what you believe you're bringing to the value of this job. Okay, there are 3 parts to a salary negotiation. And the first part is, we've already done it, which is always avoid being the first person to put a number on the table. And you've been asked all these questions. We now have all this wonderful language, how to avoid it and duck it and all those other things. And so finally, you're into phase 2, which is, okay, so here's the job offer, and here's what the job is worth. Now, let's pretend for a minute. So I'm looking at $65,000. Let's pretend that this person says to me, well, I'll offer you $50,000. Let's also pretend that I know the minimal amount of money I need to pay my bills, to live and pay my rent, eat food, so forth, is $55,000. So I got to get up over $55,000. However, wherever it is, I can be below that minimum or not up to my target of 65. I'm down here at 50. That's the offer on the table. And I got a long way to move in this counter back and forth of how to get up there. But wherever you are, whatever number gets dropped, you do the same thing. You pause and you stop and you think about it. Suppose that person had said to me $70,000 instead. I would have paused, I would have thought about it, and then I would have started negotiating. Because if they're going to offer 70, I know I may be able to move it higher. So you never want to, I mean, it's in the back of my mind where I want to get, but if it's higher, if it's lower, it doesn't really matter. That's your starting point. And what you want to do is you want to then start moving this dial up and up and up. And you do that by preparing beforehand to say, okay, if this number is down here, how am I going to say, you know, but my it's 50,000. But my research shows, and you take out the piece of paper, you take out this chart that says, you know, just last week on salary.com or payscale.com or whatever.com, here's the wage range for a dietitian. So I don't understand this. You've said you want to be fair, that you want to pay me what the market rate is, but here's the market rate. Help me understand why you're only offering 50. And so you start this conversation on the fairness. And let me remind you that even in this range, so he said, oh my God, well, you know, I guess I got to move it up to 55 because that's the bottom of the range here. But then but let me remind you about these other things that I bring to this, about the A grades I have and the year's experience and all these other things that I've gotten, and the wonderful reviews I got from the work that I was doing for those summer months. And here are the evaluations that I got, so you can see what a hard worker I am. And then let me remind you about what I contribute to this organization. And what you do is you practice, you think through what are going to be the give and take, the discussion. What are going to be my points that keep moving this dial along? And you keep that discussion going for as long as you can. But you can't do that if you shoot your wad completely in the beginning. So that's where the strategy and thinking about, okay, well, now here's the next one. Think about it beforehand. Think, okay, so here's the case. You may vary as to which one you drop next, depending on what the response is. But at least you've got the points. You've got about 10 lines in the string here that you know what you're going to do. At some point, you're going to say, ooh, at some point, he's going to say, look, this is it. I'm tired. I got another meeting. And there's a conference call going on. And the highest I can go is, $62,000. Well, I've just moved him from 50 up to 62, so I'm a little happy with this. But I'm not up to where I want to be. And you have to think through at that point what you're going to do. So there's the process, and then there's the bottom line. Now, the bottom line tells me that I'm not down at the 50, which I couldn't have accepted because I had to get above 55. So I'm thinking seriously about whether I'll accept this now. And by the way, if he had stayed on 50, if you think you're going to walk and you say, I just can't accept this, be prepared. There is a very slight possibility, not much, and you can't bluff on this. If you say, I'm sorry, you offered me this job, I was really interested in it, I thought you liked me, but this is just below anything I can accept. When you get up to walk, he or she may say, wait a minute, come back. Don't count on it. If you're going to walk, walk. But also be prepared to come back and sit down. If that happens, see where it goes. Anyway, I'm up at 62. And I've got to think long and hard about whether I want to start there or not. And that's when you come to terms with what you're going to say or do. You could say, I need to think about this overnight to see whether there's any more of a comeback after they think about it as well. I'm a little disappointed. It's not quite where I believed I should be. I believed I should be up at, it's time now to say, to 67. That's what I thought. 65, I thought I could justify this. It was certainly worth, in my mind. So I'm sorry we don't agree on this. So you can sort of throw that, I want to think about it overnight to see whether he comes back with another offer. Or you can shake hands at that moment. Whatever works for you. But again, decide pretty much where you're going to be on that bottom line when it happens. If you say yes, either that day or the next day, then you say, now let's talk about my benefits, because you're only halfway through the job. And so go back, pull out the list of benefits. Here's what I understand you're offering in benefits. Here's what the market rate is. Let's talk about this. He may say something like, look, you know, this is the standard thing. That's all we get. And every employee gets this package of benefits. That's it. Too bad for you. But say that package, since I know it's about $22,000, $23,000 difference, you know, they're only offering me 10. Then you get creative. You may say, look, what about a one-time moving expense? Because I got to move all my stuff from the BU dorm over to you know, the other side of town. Or what about helping pay off my loans? Or what about a review 6 months from now, so that you shorten the time scale of the salary itself? All those things are negotiable. So think about other things that would matter to you in a one-time, a signing bonus. You know, I'm about to sign on. What about a one-time signing bonus? Think about those benefits as well to try and get as close as you can to the $22,000 or $23,000 that you're leaving on the table. Now, final point. This is a beginning. It is all learned. I wish I had been this smart when I was through some of the jobs that I had. I was not. But it's all learned. I don't know if anybody else is doing these kinds of workshops throughout the country, so what you're getting is sort of the front end of all of this. We're on about 100 campuses right now doing this in an extensive, as I said, 2.5 hour. We do a role play, so you begin to see how you really react and what your emotions are in all this at the end of it. But in all, if I can engage you in understanding what this process is all about and the mechanics of it, and then you start to learn this, it's all learned by practice. And you'll learn more about, as much about yourself. It's not just your intellect, but how you respond emotionally. You know, some of us have trouble with authority figures, and how you sort of get beyond that, or what you need to do to stay within your own character, be yourself, be true to yourself, but also be paid and respected in a way that's fair. So this is a learning process that you just keep going through for the rest of your career, through all of your career, and you'll get better at it as you go along. But hang in there and pay as much attention to this as you do to the career, as to other things in your career, because over the lifetime, it's at least worth $1 million to you. So thank you. Are there any questions, or I will have run out of time here?
Any questions? I know my students have prepared some, so if you have a couple seconds, that'd
Sure.
be great.
Yes.
I was looking on your website, and I noticed that it looked like you gave a statistic that between like 1991 and I think year 2000, the wage gap had grown between men and women with the same credentials, and I imagine like that continues just to grow. And I was wondering, or maybe not, and I was wondering why is it continuing to grow? Like what are some of the factors?
Well, it's not, I don't think it's quite, I may not have updated, but here's the benchmark that I use. Between 1993 and now, 2009, that wage gap, the 23 cents, has not narrowed a bit. We have not caught up. So every time you hear, and thank you, because I usually throw this in at some stage in my comments, every time you think, you know, it's just a matter of time while I'm working that we'll catch up, we'll be treated fairly, it's simply not true. If we didn't catch up a penny from 1993 to 2009, that wage gap has not narrowed a penny. Through the boom of the late 1990s, through the bust of late, we are at the same place. So there's nothing inevitable about this wage gap going away. In my book, I make an obsessive case with the fact that this is about discrimination. And it underlies all this stuff. The truth is, we will never, as a society, put sufficient money into the EEOC to enforce anti-discrimination laws, whether that's race or gender or age or disability, whatever. We just have underfunded it. not a political statement. This is across Republican and Democratic administrations. It's just, we don't do it. We're not going to fund it. So the only way that we as women, we as people of all colors, close this gap in wages, because the racial gap is as bad in some places, and for Hispanics worse, than the gender gap. The only way we're going to do this is if we all act individually. And so all the more reason, or else you're going to pass it on to your kids. You're going to pass this on to your daughters, and your sisters, everybody, unless we do something about it. So the larger public policy and political part of the value of this is that if we all do this, why I get obsessed about going around every campus I can, if you all will do this for yourselves, you will have a major effect on how we start to narrow this gap, and you will over your lifetimes. But otherwise, it's not going to go away on its own. This is just, it's stunning stuff. But so don't ever buy into this. Just be patient, it'll go away on its own. I'm an economist, I'm a PhD economist, so when economists say that, I go nuts. It's not true. What other questions like that are you in? Oh, okay. Wait, she hasn't had a chance yet. Hold on. Yes?
Have you faced any wage gap discrimination?
Well, I'll tell you one story. The politician in me has to tell you one story. When Michael Dukakis was first elected governor, there was a big brouhaha. His wife had convinced him that he ought to hire 4 women cabinet secretaries for his cabinet. And so the Boston Globe was playing with the front page all the time. Oh, we're going to have these women cabinet secretaries. And so I walked into his office the day after, his transition office, the day after Christmas to talk with the interviewers there. And there were 3 jobs left. They'd appointed 2 women, 2 to go, 3 jobs left. Environmental affairs, economic affairs, and consumer affairs. And so these 2 people who were interviewing said, so what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know business regulation. That's what consumer affairs is all about. I haven't been a part of the environmental movement, so I don't know much about the environment. I have this PhD in economics. I've run some companies, so let's talk economic affairs. And they say, no, that's for the guy. And so I have a 5-minute interview. And in that 5 minutes, now, and the other moral of this story is, you never know where job opportunities or career opportunities are going to pop up. 2 years prior to this little vignette, the day after Christmas in 1974, 2 years prior, I tried to sell a company, my company that I was running, to somebody, and it didn't work. But I made friends with this guy who then called me and said his pal Mike was running for governor, and did I want to help out? I said, okay, Dick, I'll help out. He said, you get to be his education advisor. I said, okay, what does that mean? He says, well, that means you cut out articles from the Boston Globe on education. And you mail them to me, Dick, and I'll give them to my pal Mike, okay? So I snipped and clipped articles out of the Boston Globe on education. And I met Mike Dukakis just once. He was having a meeting on community schools, and I went as his education advisor. And I didn't say anything, because of course I didn't know anything at that stage. I'm just the clipper. So I'm sitting there, and so that's when I've met him. I then had to leave my educational advisor role because I got a job in New York City, and I was commuting from my house in Lexington to New York City every day, and I was a little tired. So I couldn't do this. So a year later, when Michael Dukakis gets elected, that's when my pal Dick calls back and says, there are these very important jobs. Why don't you come in and interview for one? So that's when I said, I can't do it until after Christmas because I go home to see my parents. And so that's when I tootle in there the day after Christmas. Now, I say all that because, as a backdrop, I walk out of there after 5 minutes, but in that 5 minutes, Mike Dukakis walks by the door knowing he's got to appoint 3 more cabinet secretaries. It's the day after Christmas, and he's taking over the day after New Year's. So time is tight. And so he says, Ev, whatever happens here, stop by and see me in a couple hours. I'm taking my wife out. It's her birthday. I got to take her out to lunch. Okay, Mike, I say. I'll do that. So I walk back in 2 hours later. I cool my heels. I go down and I have a little lunch. And I walk back in 2 hours later, and he's there with another guy who's about to become his chief secretary. And he says to me, have you ever fired anybody? And I say, yeah, I've hired and I've fired. I've managed a couple hundred people in a company, and so yeah. And then he says, how would you handle drilling on the Georges Bank? Now, knowing that I'm not an environmentalist, I say, I do not know, but if you'll give me 24 hours to read up on this, I will advise you how to think about it, because that's the most intelligent response I can give. That is the day after Christmas. On New Year's Eve, I am announced as the Secretary of Environmental Affairs for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I will have 5,000 employees. I will have a $100 million budget. I will be in charge of $1 billion worth of lateral and collector sewers to clean up the rivers and streams of Massachusetts and all these other things. So, and to his credit, Mike Dukakis saw that somebody with an economic mind protecting the environmental statutes was a very smart move. But I didn't get the job I thought I should have gotten because of the kind of gender stereotyping that was going on. I did get this other wonderful opportunity. It was the best job I ever had in state, well, one of the best jobs I ever had in state government. And it was wonderful. But it was, so lots of little stories in here, but take advantage of these opportunities, both professionally and politically. You never know where they're going to lead. And then you got to be prepared when some odd lot thing happens. It's also the reason why when Dr. Bell introduced me, why I decided to run for public office. Now you know, when we all got thrown out 4 years later, I reasoned that I love state government. It was easier to get elected than appointed. Because if you've been through that experience, you think, this appointment business is really weird. So I better go set off to be elected, which I had not one clue about how to do. I'd never done it in my adult life. And I had to learn all the skills and whatever it takes to become elected in Massachusetts. But it's a strange career. Anyway, long answer to a short question. One more, and then I'll let you all go. Yes?
Hi. Once you're already in a job, how do you find out if there is a wage gap? Like, is there some sort of public, like, database of things for your specific company?
Great question. It depends upon the place. There are some companies that will tell you that they will fire you if you discuss what you're earning. So the best thing to do is to take that job and go back onto the internet and see what the marketplace is all about, rather than comparing yourself to anybody else there. If you work for a public agency or a public institution, they typically have to publish these salaries, and they're known. The place that pays the best is the state of Minnesota. If you ever want an experience, Minnesota, you can't just go live in Minnesota, which is very cold and miserable, just like here. But you have to work for the state, and then if you work for the state, they've tallied up every single job category in all of Minnesota. And I was just looking at this last night for a strange reason, but so they have grain inspectors, and they have meat inspectors, and they have teachers, and they have natural resource managers, and they have everything else you have in state government, except in Minnesota, being farming has this other stuff. They require that every job be categorized by the kind of experience, the accountability of the job, the danger of the job, and the responsibilities of that job. And they grade every job in points. And so it allows them to compare dietitians with guys working in the at the swimming pools or the skating rinks, and with guys who are running the natural resources, the state forests and parks. It allows teachers to be compared with traditionally male truck driver jobs, whatever the comparisons that are traditionally male and female. And you get ranked and you get paid for the job and all those responsibilities in the job, not who does the job. So they are the most gender-blind, race-blind employer in the nation. And if you go on their website, you can look down there and you can see these job classifications, and you begin to see how you compare. It's stunning stuff, and I hold them up. It always pains me to do that in Massachusetts, but I hold them up as the best employer in the nation. And it's all public stuff. Finding out what is paid in various companies, private companies, is very hard to do. A lot of it is, however, sort of common talk. And somebody will drop a paycheck on your desk, or something will happen. So there's a little gossip that goes on. So you can find snippets that'll tell you whether you got a serious problem or not. But the best thing, if you have, is not to deal with it internally, but to go back to an objective market rate and then raise the question that way. I've held you for a long time, but thank you very much.